Hello and welcome to my channel. The video I'm about to share is a must watch, and I'm calling out all my brothers and sisters to come and check out this video. Well, in this video, a white lady talks about a policy in the United States which was made official by the government in 1968 that helped white people to buy homes and deny this help to black people. And she talks about how this system has helped palm color people to pass on wealth to generations and generations. Systemically, over decades, the government policies have encouraged mortgage companies to lend to only white borrowers in order to cut off the legs of minorities trying to build some family wealth, which has contributed to the wide gap of wealth between white communities and communities of color. To mention but just a few. So she talks about a lot of things. More reason you need to watch this video to the end. Let's check out the video and get to talk afterwards.
It was the official policy of the United States government until 1968. In my lifetime and the lifetime of 90 senators who serve today, the official policy of this government was to help white people buy homes and to deny that help to black people. And because the federal government had set the standard, private lenders enthusiastically followed in Washington's lead. Homes are the way that millions of working families build some economic security. They pay down a mortgage and own an asset that, over time, often appreciates. A home serves as security to fund other ventures, to start a small business, or to send a youngster to college. And if grandma and grandpa can hang on to the home and get it paid off, they can often pass along an asset that boosts the finances of the next generation and the one after that. And that's exactly what white people have done for generations, but not black people. Systematically, over many decades, government policies that encouraged mortgage companies to lend only to white borrowers cut the legs out from underneath minority families trying to build some family wealth. And the result has been exactly what you'd predict. It's contributed to a staggering gap of wealth between white communities and communities of color today. Here's one statistic from Massachusetts. According to the Boston Globe, the median net worth of white families living in Boston is $247,500. And the median net worth for a black family is $8. That's something that all Americans, regardless of race, should be ashamed of. When I was traveling around the country in the aftermath of the financial crisis, it became clear to me that the crash had made the problem worse. Subprime lenders who had peddled mortgages full of tricks and traps had specifically targeted minority borrowers. That meant that during the Great Recession, a huge number of minority borrowers lost their homes. And when rising home prices helped white Americans regain some financial security, communities of color, with their lower homeownership rates and their higher foreclosure rates, were often left behind. Again, just one example. According to Pew, between 2010 and 2013, the median wealth of white households grew by 2.4%, but the wealth of Hispanic households in that same time fell by 14.3%, and the wealth of African American households fell by 33.7%. Mortgage discrimination didn't end in the 1960s when formal redlining policies were abolished. It didn't end with the tightening of mortgage rules following the financial crisis. Lending discrimination is still alive and well in America in 2018. According to a new report that just came out from the Center for Investigative Reporting and Reveal, in 2015 and 2016, nearly 2/3 of mortgage lenders denied loans for people of color at higher rates than for white people. This problem affects both big lenders and small lenders, and it's nationwide. Minority borrowers were more likely to be denied a mortgage than white borrowers with the same income in 61 different cities across America. And how do we know that? Because of HMDA data. That's how we can see how much black families were charged for a mortgage, or how often Latino families were denied a chance to take out a mortgage. And we can compare those numbers with white borrowers who have the same incomes and same credit scores. But we can't do that if the data are missing. It is impossible to detect and fight mortgage discrimination without HMDA data. The bill on the floor of the Senate says that 85% of banks will no longer be required to report HMDA data, including the borrower's credit score and age, the loan's points, fees, and interest rate, and the property value. 85%. These data are essential to figuring out whether the borrower got a fair deal or not. If this bill passes, there will be entire communities where there won't be enough data to figure out whether borrowers are getting ripped off. Entire communities where it will be impossible to monitor whether people are getting cheated because of their race or gender. Entire communities where federal and state regulators won't be able to bring cases, and independent groups like Reveal won't be able to hold these groups accountable. Sure, banks will save a little money by not having to fill out the HMDA data. But when communities of color are once again left behind, there will be no way to prove it. And that's why civil rights groups around the country have spoken up against this bill. The Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights said, and I'm quoting, "Exempting the overwhelming majority of our nation's banks and credit unions from an expanded HMDA requirement that would better enable federal regulators, state attorneys general, fair housing advocates, and others to identify and address discriminatory and predatory mortgage practices is unwise." The Urban League and the National Community Reinvestment Coalition wrote in a newspaper column that the bill, quote, "would be a giant step backwards for the public and national groups who use this data to ensure that banks treat all borrowers equally." And according to the NAACP, the bill, quote, "would devastate our attempts to determine and potentially rectify racially discriminatory lending or loan approval patterns at play." This is about basic fairness. HMDA data is an investment we should be making to make sure that all qualified Americans have the same chance to buy a home. Throughout our history, Washington has always fallen short of that goal. Gutting HMDA allows our country and our government to ignore discrimination, letting history repeat itself. Communities of color will pay the price if this Congress makes the same mistakes again. It isn't too late. We can stop this bill from becoming law.
I know this is an old video, more reason I'm sharing it so that we understand some of the reasons why there is this huge gap of wealth between the white community and our black community. This is what was going on in America, and maybe this video will help us know if there has been any changes for these policies or not over the years. And let me first start with sharing the history of the American mortgage. You know, home ownership has been a part of the American dream, whether your generation, your grandparents' generation, or your great-great-parents' generation. Most people equate the thought of owning a home with achieving the right type of success. After all, owning property can help you build wealth, give you access to equity, and offer something tangible to be passed down for generations, which has been one way whites have passed on wealth to generations and generations. And the first real mortgage loans in America weren't issued until the late 1700s. Now, after the information of the first commercial bank by the 1800s, banks and mortgage loans were common, but still, unlike the mortgage loans we see today, at that point in time, balloon payments were common, and the mortgage mortgage loan terms offered by lenders were a lot shorter than you would expect, making it tough for buyers to use them or even qualify. Now, the events that have occurred over the last 100 years have had an even bigger impact on shaping mortgage loans. The introduction of new laws, along with massive economic shifts and other events like questionable lending practices, have all played a part in refining the mortgage loan process. Now, in 1933, the New Deal transformed the American mortgage system. As part of the New Deal, the Homeowners Loan Act was signed into law in 1933 and had a massive impact on how mortgages were being handled. Now, the goal of the Homeowners Loan Act was to provide emergency relief with respect to the home mortgage indebtedness. Now, to refine home mortgages to extend relief to the owners occupied by them and who are unable to amortize their debt elsewhere. Now, this act also marked the start of redlining the process of color coding maps to indicate where it was safe to insure mortgages, often leaving out predominantly black neighborhoods. Furthermore, the Federal Housing Administration's underwriting manual advised highway installations as reasonable means to separate black and white neighborhoods. Now, in 1968, Fair Housing Act is passed to prohibit discrimination in the housing market. Civil rights were front and center during the late 1960s, and the focus on equal rights for all led President Lyndon Johnson to push legislation for fair housing to prohibit discrimination during the sale, rental, or financing of housing based on a person's race, religion, national origin, sex, or other factors. A fair housing bill was considered by Congress from 1966 to 1967, but ultimately stalled and was not passed. However, the push for the fair housing laws continued, especially as Hispanic and African American veterans returned home from the Vietnam War and found they were unable to purchase or rent homes in certain areas due to discrimination. Now, in 1968, after Dr. Martin Luther King incident, the president pushed Congress to quickly approve the Fair Housing Act, which our representatives did, which meant people looking for housing could no longer be discriminated against due to their race or national origin. But while the act made discriminatory practices illegal, it has done little in the 50+ years since to expand segregation and increase fair housing opportunities. Now, this is basically the history of mortgage in America, which runs down all the way from way back to today. Now, let's check out a few comments and see if people think these policies have changed or not. The first comment reads, "The system is rigged. I still can't buy a house unless it's worth nothing." Facts, still happening. Question is, when will the government make us whole? It is still going on and everyone knows it. Okay, those are some of the comments from people. What are your thoughts on this? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. For me, it's a bye-bye and see you in my next video.